swamps, rivers and lakes, above the forests and grasslands. Red lights are flashing, wanyama pori, dhidi ya upotevu, na tupinge ujangili na biashara haramu. Wanakuza wanyama wetu wa thamani. Turudishe idadi ya wanyama waliopotea. Nature is calling me, nature is calling you and me. Yes, I am. It's calling you and me.
Vamos proteger a natureza. A natureza dá-nos puro. Nossa comida, nossa saúde, tudo depende da natureza. Ter mais nossas economias. Vamos proteger.
Nature is calling. Nous devons protéger notre terre, gardons nos sources dans la rivière et dans l'océan. Oh, on a rien mis gardons notre environnement et l'air propre, parce que c'est notre vie, c'est l'heure de ramener notre nature. On a rien mis. Nature is calling. Nature is calling. It's calling you and me. On a rien mis. The best of nature is disappearing. Different species are no more. Our land, our fresh water in the rivers and the ocean. Keep our environment and air clean, because this is our life. Time to bring back our nature. It's calling you and me. This is the calling. Nature is calling. You and I. It's calling you and me.
Rajan, over to you.
Thank you, Deborah. Welcome, everyone. We are very happy to host you today. This webinar is organized by the WWF Regional Office for Africa in partnership with WWF Cameroon, WWF Madagascar, WWF Central Africa Republic, and WWF Gabon, where I am speaking to you from. I am Rejan Olivia, the Communication Officer for WWF Gabon. In a moment, we shall start our webinar with a 2-minute film and then welcome our panelists. For now, please enjoy one of our collaborative productions. Please note that there is a translation services in French and in Portuguese. And please keep your questions until the end of the session when we open up for the Q&A. You can also post your questions in the chat.
Rajan, you can proceed. We already played the video. So if you can carry on with the bio, thank you.
So I will introduce our panelists. The first panelist is Dr. Amani Ngasuru, interim WWF Africa Regional Director and Country Director of WWF Tanzania. Background in nearshore oceanography, fisheries management, and integrated coastal zone management. Experience with large marine ecosystem management, marine protected areas, oceanographic research, sonar image, processing, and application of GIS for coastal zone management. Our second speaker is Arisoa Rakotomdrazafi, WWF Africa Climate Change Adaptation Coordinator. Arisoa is based in Antananarivo, Madagascar. Ariso is a highly motivated environmental scientist with over 10 years work on climate change adaptation. She is currently coordinating the WWF Africa adaptation work based in Madagascar. She has practical experiences in mainstream and implementing climate change adaptation into conservation work. She is aiming at delivering transformative climate actions across Africa and being among the women leaders that will push the agenda forward. Our third speaker is Thomas Opande, WWF Africa Lead Energy Access Initiative. Thomas is based in Kampala, Uganda. Expert knowledge on issues that are undermining energy access and a just energy transition in the Africa. As the lead of the WWF Regional Energy Hub, he coordinates energy work in Africa with special focus on energy policy framework, access to renewable energy funds, and capacity building for promoting renewable energy solutions. Our fourth speaker is Nelson Opani, Senior Manager, Communication and Partnership, World Scout Bureau Africa Support Center. The Africa Scout, our long-running global youth partner. Nelson is a communication and public relations practitioner with more than eight years experience in the international nonprofit sector, working with young people on non-formal education. He currently leads the World Organization of the Scout Movement Communication, strategic partnerships, advocacy, and resource mobilization work in sub-Saharan Africa. Our last speaker is Rose Tuo, our Africa Head of Communication and Marketing at WWF International. She has a background in building movement and public mobilization campaigns, strategic public-private sector partnership to create lifestyle brands that have a unique connection within school and out of school youth. She is a co-creator of the G-Page, a youth campaign which produced the MTV Sugar TV series. She is co-founder of the Top 100 Young Conservation Champions Awards and member of the UN Gender and Climate Change Network. I now welcome Rose Tuo, which I have just presented, our Africa Head of Communication and Marketing at WWF International. She's based in Nairobi, Kenya, and she will give us the context and the theme of our webinar. Thank you, Rose.
Thank you, John, and welcome everyone to the creation of our biggest hour for Africa. This year, we're asking you to reimagine Earth Hour, and we are hoping to create the biggest hour for Earth. As landmarks and homes across the planet will take part in Earth Hour's iconic switch off moment, we're also asking people to switch off, but in your own way, by taking a break from your routine and everyday distractions. Just spend 60 minutes by doing something positive for our planet. That's why this Saturday, on the 25th of March at 8:30, we're asking everyone to join us for 60 minutes and give an hour for Earth, thus creating the biggest hour for Earth Hour. Anyone everywhere can join and is invited to join in creating this biggest hour. We need more people, we need partners, we need friends, and we need our families to join us more than ever to join Earth Hour and provide 60 minutes for global unity, show support, and celebration for this planet. Whether that's by cleaning up the beach, planting trees, cooking dinner with sustainable ingredients, especially our local food as Africans, or getting friends together for Earth Hour event. Anyone, anywhere is invited for the biggest hour. For example, I am planning on taking my entire family for a hike up the mountains this weekend. Hopefully we'll all make it, including the dog. As we look to 2030, where we want the Africa we desire, this year's Earth Hour will inspire and support people to decide what they really want this planet to be like. We're inviting you to use the hashtag #TheBiggestHourForEarth, the hashtag Earth Hour, and My Hour for Earth, and let us know what you're doing or planning to do. Please share your pictures and videos as well using the same hashtags, and let's make this Africa's finest hour. Back to you, Richard. I hand
Thank
over to
you
Dr.
so much.
Amani Gusaru.
Yeah. Thank you so much for your sharing. Yeah, we are welcome now our Dr. Amani Gusaru, our interim WWF Africa Regional Director and Country Director of WWF Tanzania. Thank you, Amani.
Yeah, thank you very much. And once again, I also want to welcome each one of you to the Earth Hour in Africa this year. And this is a WWF movement on nature. And we're asking each one of you to give 1 hour in the whole year back to the planet, because nature is calling. And over the last few years or decades, if you like, we have seen that our planet has been on distress. The climate change have been everywhere in the world. The ocean and the atmospheric interactions have changed, and the ocean circulation have changed. And as you know, the ocean circulation governs all the climatology. So the climatology is confused, and this is making several responses. And one of these responses is the change of seasons. People don't know what to plant anymore, and so much has changed. Deforestation is rampant, and water stress is everywhere. And this is why I'm saying, the planet is on distress and is calling us. And this movement is very much aligned to WWF mission for people to live in harmony with nature. And much of these changes actually have been exacerbated by actions of us humans. And the movement started back in 2007 in Australia, but this was internalized and actualized and activated in Africa, more strongly, vigorously, 7 years ago. And we have done public mobilization of people in all 54 countries in Africa. And the focus back then in Australia and other northern countries, has been on focusing on energy saving and the switching off lights for awareness purposes. However, in Africa, our main agenda is, like I said, the response that we're having in Africa is mainly on the deforestation and destruction of physical destructions of habitats and ecosystems. So our focus is nature restoration and water stresses. The rivers are dwindling, the lakes are getting smaller, and we want to focus there in terms of our crusade and our movement on this. And public enforcement of sustainable development is what we're focusing as well, and people-centered inclusive conservation. Next. And I'm going to take you through now, next slide. Yeah, I'm going to take you through some of the experiences, just before that, please, that we have been having over the 7 years and focusing on Madagascar and Uganda. In Madagascar back in 2013, we focused on improving stoves, distributing 1,000 improved stoves in Toliara. And we also planted 100,000 trees in Tana River. In Uganda, back in 2013, WWF created one of a kind, world's first Earth Hour forest to fight 6,000 hectares of deforestation. And they've been planting in that forest once every month. So that's a major. And if we go to Tanzania and South Africa, Tanzania started heavily getting involved in this back in 2016-17. And we have focused on installing solar panels for schools in order to improve the performance of the students. When you have power, you have everything. Also, solar panels in hospitals, serving 1,000 people with vital care services at night. And in South Africa back in 2017, we actually mobilized 12,000 South Africans to hold Eskom, the South Africa Energy Utility Company, accountable by demanding renewable energy contribution and the meeting of COP21 commitment. Next slide. And just going on in terms of our world here today in Africa. And you know, like I said before, our focus is towards the immediate needs and actions of the people, because we see the fury of nature in Africa. And one example is you know, what we have seen in Mozambique, you know, just the last couple of weeks, where this country has been hit by two cyclones, and the Fred cyclone hit and created heavy floods. And this is something that we have seen time and again, you know, not just in Mozambique, but other parts as well. And we focus on building the awareness of people in terms of the changing climate and what they can do, particularly the oceanic frontal changes that I described earlier, and where these are coming from. They're going to be more severe in the future, and what they need to do to survive. And in Kenya and Tanzania, in East Africa, we have seen droughts, you know, 2 years in a row, no rains. And the animals are dying, wildlife and livestock as well. And here we are focusing on building the adaptation of our communities to these kind of changes, making sure that they're harvesting water and building charcoal dams, integrated water resources management, and managing the wetlands, so they get prepared for these kind of changes. And the other thing that we need to promote is nature-based solutions. You know, there are some nature-based solutions. Nature is changing. You know, we got to adapt as we go along with it. And these have been largely unexplored. And you can focus on nature positive food production systems. When things have gotten bad, you have to make the changes as we go along with these changes. And some of these systems are existing that actually can reduce the emission. You know, we have climate change, climate smart agriculture that we're promoting in many parts of Africa, and the land use planning and the sustainable land management is some of the solutions. And also we're exploring, you know, other solutions for restoring degraded ecosystems, forest landscape restoration programs, and engaging with partners to make sure that 30% of the land and freshwater and ocean habitats are actually conserved, because we've got to conserve what we have because you'll need it in the future. So we have to step up our conservation in order to build adaptation systems for our communities and our countries. And next, the other thing that I want to leave you with is that, you know, the shocking statistics that are still here with us in Africa. You know, 600 million people, you know, in Africa are still lacking basic access to affordable, reliable climate energy. So we are advocating for sustainable energy for all. You're going to hear in this webinar a colleague talking about, you know, energy solutions, but we're still far behind. You know, millions and millions of people are still lacking access to clean energy. But also have a billion people that are lacking the cooling for food security. You need to, you know, you need refrigeration. If you don't have the energy, you know, the refrigeration and the post-harvest losses, and, you know, food will be wasted. And we still have so many people that are lacking access to these facilities, you know, the medical supplies, you know, livelihood, prevention of heat-related death, you know, is also something that we still have it in Africa today. And these are some of the things that together, you know, we can work together and build awareness and for the changes that are coming. And some of these solutions, you know, that we have been advocating include the use of wind, you know, the use of solar, like what we have done in Tanzania, geothermal. You know, Kenya is leading the way, Tanzania is coming, and the small hydros. And lastly, I'm calling you to join us this year. You know, we do this annually, and 2023, you know, we're asking you to come together with us, and this hour actually offers the moment of solidarity, you know, opportunity to come together and reflect and see how you're going to survive the coming years and decades, and look after each other. And we only have one home, and that we share, and we have to protect it. So thank you very much. And at this point in time in the webinar, I would like now to introduce a colleague of mine, Hariso, Africa Climate Change Adaptation Coordinator, that is sitting in Madagascar. So over to you, Hariso. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Dr. Amani, and hi everyone, nice to see you in this webinar. So I would say that Dr. Amani has already given really key highlights on what's going on in Africa, and it's quite alarming, I would say, but we stay positive that we can change the dots. So next slide. As we all know, we have kind of 7 years, and the 7 years are quite crucial for us in determining whether we can stay in our planet boundaries with regards to 1.5 degrees C. But in parallel to that, it means that we African, we need to adapt much faster. And just to mention about the recent IPCC report that was released last year, and still giving some alarming facts that Africa is really at the top of climate crisis, and where we need to rely our efforts to address that. And I'm just maybe mentioning, based on this report, that we are going to still lose our nature, still lose our people livelihoods, and just mentioning about, I'm not going to give more details, but regarding like a species that is going to lose 30% of their population and our habitat, species between 18%, and migration that is becoming more, I would say, devastating in Africa. More than over 70 million of people is going to migrate, and so on, many of that. And just as said by Dr. Amani regarding droughts, floods, the recent trend that report done by the Global Center on Adaptation highlighted that just between January 2021 and September 2022, approximately 52 million of people were impacted by drought, by flooding. So I would say that it's not just to scare us, but for us to think quickly and think faster what we need to do for Africa. Next slide. And when we are thinking about Africa, and just starting with our commitment, all of us know about our commitment regarding NDC, and there are really greatest efforts done by Africa in updating our NDCs and making sure that it reflects our needs. In parallel to that, when you talk about adaptation related, how we are going to reduce the impact of climate change in Africa, so far 17 countries, Africa countries have submitted. It's quite asking ourselves, is that enough? 17 countries. We need more. We need more countries to develop the national adaptation plan, which is kind of framework for us to indicate what we need to address climate change in Africa. So I would say that we need more movement on that. How about our funding going to adaptation? I would say that based on all of the studies, it's still not enough. And looking at this state and trend reports done by ZCA, the amount of funding that we need for NDC is quite huge, as indicated in the slide. And based on like, I would say 2019, 2020 needs, only 20% of funding were available. So we still need to do more around funding as well. And moving to solution, because given that 7 years left, we need really strong solution. we need really quick solution. We need urgent solution to make sure that we can still rebuild our Africa, our home, what is our priorities. So I am more talking, I would say that there are a lot of solutions that we can put on board, but more talking about nature-based solution, as Dr. Ramani has already raised in his talk. There is really growing evidence that nature can really help us to address the climate crisis. And in Africa, I would say that we have the potential to deliver that. But in parallel as well, as adaptation is really locally solution, based on locally solution, we are really pushing forward for locally led solution. Next slide. So just mentioning a few of them, in Africa, within WWF, we've given the potential that we have on mangroves, on coral reefs, on forests. WWF have initiated many works around that, like in Uganda, in Madagascar, in Tanzania, in Kenya, in Cameroon, and so on. And the reason that we need really to tap on that, I would say, potential of Africa to make sure that we support nature to deal with climate change, but we also put nature up front to give us the solution. And there are a lot of researches that really show evidence that is really effective. But I would like to say as well that for sure that nature-based solution is not only the one. There are many categories of solutions that we can implement in Africa and where we have already succeeded. So we need to, from now on, based on the 7 years left, we need to see how we can really upgrade all of this solution. And next. And something that I would like to add regarding solution, something that we need to think about how we can really close the gaps between commitment and implementation, because where we still fail, as there are, as said, we need really to move quick and fast, and with creative and innovative solution for Africa. And next slide. And we also regarding the cost of adaptation, for sure that it's higher. And we need, as African, we need really part of the strong player, not waiting the fund to come, but really how African people, how stakeholders in Africa could really catalyze the funding stream and where we can move into effective implementation. And something that recently happened during COP27 is on loss and damage. Loss and damage, and part of the win is really that there is the disestablishment of the fund for loss and damage. But where we need to make connection is how we can really work hand on hand to address climate adaptation. We're trying to adjust the impact of climate change, but also looking at the loss and damage, something that adaptation cannot really cover. And where what our thinking is more how we can create really, I would say, innovative partnership. And just an example from WWF, currently we've established a partnership with Red Cross, where we plan to go hand on hand with addressing adaptation and addressing loss and damages. And that will give us really window for impactful work. And something that's relevant Africa as well is currently there are a lot of accelerator program happening in Africa. How we can scale that up, given that we need really to speed the solution. So how we can rely our efforts, including youth, that we are running to this, developing this accelerator program that will help us really to design the right solution for Africa. And my last word is regarding nature. Nature, as you know, WWF is really engaging in pushing the nature agenda. How we can make sure that our potential in Africa, our nature in Africa, our biodiversity, our ecosystem will really support the issue of climate change, and where we can support the livelihood of our communities and really having tangible cases that show, that will attract, that will help us really to to build a better future for us. And regarding Earth Hour, I would say that Africa is really part of the solution, and let's use this movement also to think about positive solution that will help us really to build the resilience of Africa. So I will stop there and will give the floor to my colleague Thomas, who is our regional lead on energy, and will give us more insight on that. So over to you, Thomas.
Thank you so much, Harisoa, and thank you so much, Dr. Ngusaru, for the very good presentations. I will deep dive into the energy space in Africa. Please, next slide. Yep, as Dr. Ngusaru had said, many millions of people in Africa lack electricity. You see that I put the figure at around 900 people lack direct connection to electricity. This amounts to almost 100 million households. This is really a big number considering that the population of Africa is 1.2 billion people. And out of these, 850 million lack access to affordable clean solutions. And even to make it worse, about 700 million still depend on traditional biomass for cooking, which definitely has a low efficiency. And that really means direct contribution to deforestation, which is undermining biodiversity and bioconservation efforts. And we are all farmers in Africa, but you see that only 10% of our farming is motorized. So that means 65% is still human power and 25% is animal power. That really undermines our productivity and our ability to produce enough food for us to eat. But the good side is that Africa is very open and willing to tap into the renewable energy potential, and we have positivities, which among them is a very young population. And we have abundant renewable energy resources, particularly sun, wind, and geothermal. Our governments are willing and are making different efforts in different spaces so that all Africans can get renewable energy or can get energy. And that is an opportunity and a good signal for us in the CSO and conservation sector to work with the government. And more important, we have very good replication opportunities from best practices in Asia, Australia, Europe, and other parts of the world. Next slide, please. So why don't we have enough energy in Africa? We are lacking the right frameworks, particularly the policies. And we need to make some deliberate efforts for us to be able to increase investment, particularly in the energy space. And we also need to improve regional collaboration. By regional collaboration, I mean that it makes more market sense to have a regional bloc like East Africa Community, ECAS, SADC, for example, than having each country going on their own. This opens up the market, and this makes more sense for investment and selling power across the border than each country having many small power generation plants. And before that happens, there is a very good underlying factor that each of the countries must have a very good level of ambition. We must see the bigger goal and work together as a country so that the country sees the potential of giving energy and using the correct energy sources that we are advocating. If you look in the African space, you see that big commitments have been made by Egypt, Ethiopia, Kenya, Ghana, Morocco, Namibia, and South Africa. Those are very recognizable. But there's also very good level of ambitions from Cape Verde, Djibouti, Rwanda, and Swaziland. Overall, in Africa, we need between $27 to $31 billion per year, which should be continuous for a given period of time, like 10 years, to be able to put us to where we want in terms of energy access to our citizens. But the figures are very grim. You see that in 2017, we could only get $5.1 billion, which was not even equally distributed. So you see that only out of 13 countries which were sampled, we can only talk of 3. The other 10 received very little amount. So still we have a lot of energy inequality or energy gap, as we can call it. Next slide. Yep. So what are we doing at WWF? We support good governance because we believe that without good governance, the energy sector will be skewed and will favor a few people, and might not necessarily be the green we want, because our biggest aim is to keep the energy sector as green as possible. Remember, energy is our mother and father. We need energy for everything. So the greener it is, the better for us. The less green it is, the more it is for the earth and for the environment. So we support policy and regulatory framework which favor renewable energy pathways and not fossil fuel pathways. And also we support private sector investments in the green sector. We also encourage governments to create viable business environment and develop ambitious renewable energy plans. I know this is now a big contrast because there is a lot of efforts happening in the gas sector, but we are continuing to engage in the renewable energy sector because we believe an ambitious renewable energy sector is very important for our growth and for our future. And that means we tackle issues like subsidies for renewable energy, low interest rates for investment in renewable energy, collaterals by the governments, licenses, etc., so that the investment potential for renewable energy should be more favorable and should be the option of choice for any private investor who wants to do that. But more important also, we tackle issues around transboundary trade. We know that if you have a country of 30, 40 million, or sometimes some African countries are only 10 or even below, then you don't make any economical sense for any investor to do positive trade or to invest. But it makes more sense when you have a pool or when you have a regional block and you are talking of about 400 or 500 million people, that makes a lot of investment sense for any potential investors. Next slide, please. The role number 2 is that all this we are talking about investments and require engagement by the financial institutions. Money is everything. Investing in energy are always big investments, and more so renewable energy is even bigger investment in capital investment. Although it is cheaper in the long run, there has to be access to the initial capital, which should be affordable and viable. Because if the interest is very high, then you end up with stranded assets, which will not be able to pay back the loan which the investor has been given. But for that to be possible, you have to strengthen the capacity of the SMEs and the investors so that they think in an innovative manner and they make attractive projects so that they're able to access cheap and affordable funds. They should be able to predict demand, which will really determine where and how they invest. And also that will also increase their access to available financial instruments, which should be able to spearhead investments for renewable energy. Next slide, please. Yeah, but more important, I've talked a little bit about capacity building, but you see that capacity building still is very, very important. We cannot do without capacity building. Remember, renewable energy is new in Africa and renew is still in many other parts of the world. So we need to strengthen the capacity building. We need to understand the advantages of renewable energy vis-a-vis fossil fuels. And that will be able to help us to develop innovations that are flexible and local context specific. And also such kind of innovations will be able to help us in the marketing sector where we have joint marketing and regional blocks, and also to really target how to do proper research and how to communicate so that people know the energy of choice. We also want the people to start demanding that we only want renewable energy and we don't want energy from other sources. That really requires a lot of communication and sharing best experiences from other countries. Next slide, please. So the energy sector really requires a lot of stakeholders, all of them with different interests, and coordination between the different players, the private sector, the CSOs, the governments, and more important, the different government ministries and the different countries within an economic bloc is very, very important. So we are continuing to improve on this coordination by bringing people together so that everybody can go in one direction and not pulling each other down. So we facilitate independent dialogue and support independent dialogue between those players and form coalitions, form coalitions for advocacy work within the unharmonized energy sector. Next slide, please. Yeah, you see on the diagrams below the big potential we have in Africa. What I wanted to show on this one is that basically Africa is able to power itself purely on renewable energy sources. You see the parts in blue shows you where there is rich sun, potential for the sun. The black shows you where there's rich potential for wind and also geothermal. So we have a lot of potential, and we should be able to go 100% green without adding in any other sources from oil and gas and all the other sectors. The last slide, please. Thank you so much, Rejan. I take this opportunity to invite my next presenter, Mr. Nelson Opan. Please welcome to the floor. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Thomas, and thank you everybody for this opportunity. And I think we've heard from the previous speakers a lot about what's happening and what we need to do. So I'm going to speak from the perspective of the work that we are doing as the Scout movement, together with a lot of support from partners like WWF. So Scouting and WWF have a long history of collaboration, with the first partnership starting back in 1973. And currently we are looking at MOUs or engagements between the Scouting movement and WWF at global level, regional, but also at national level, where Scouts are working directly with WWF country offices. And our partnership is focused around empowering young people with knowledge and also inspiring them to take action for the preservation of and restoration of nature. And one of the things that has come up as a result of that collaboration is an educational program we are calling Champions for Nature, that we've developed together with WWF as part of our initiatives to anchor environmental education for young people in Scouting. But also over the years, we've worked to support mobilization of young people around Earth Hour. And just like we've done previously, this year we also have young people from around Africa and the world engaging with Earth Hour in many ways that I'm going to briefly share with us. And some of the ways that we are working with young people around Earth Hour is on environmental education. And as a movement in 2019, we launched what we are calling a global mobilization for young people to support the achievement of the SDGs. And we all know that the SDGs are all about sustainability. And through this, we are educating young people, but also enabling them to take action at a very local level to address local challenges that help to enhance sustainability of their communities, but also at a personal level in terms of behavior change and adapting more sustainable lifestyles. Our environmental education program is anchored around what we are referring to as our Earth Tribe network, which is basically a global network of young people who have a commitment towards addressing sustainability issues. And this is not just for Scouts alone, it's open to young people from all walks of life, and it presents them with options, ideas of activities and projects that they can implement at a local level to address different issues. And one of them is we currently have 3 challenges within that Earth Tribe network, and one of them is the Champions for Nature that I just talked about, developed together with WWF. We have the Plastic Titanus Challenge, which empowers young people to understand the impact of pollution, and particularly plastic pollution, on the environment, and come up with ways through which to address that. Thomas has just talked about renewable energy, and as a movement, we have a program around solar education. We're calling it Scouts Go Solar. So it's an opportunity for young people to understand the immense power that energy has in terms of changing the whole discussion or actions around sustainability. And we're encouraging young people to not just learn about how to utilize solar energy, but also to support their communities. And we have examples, for instance, in Zimbabwe, where Scouts have managed to install solar lighting for schools. We also have examples in Kenya where scouts are helping community members to adopt the use of solar lighting, particularly also to help their children with schooling. The second area of activity around Earth Hour is on inspiring and encouraging young people to undertake grassroots projects addressing different areas of sustainability. And one of them is on environmental conservation, and as a movement, nature and environment is really core to our existence, being a non-formal outdoor-based educational movement. So Scouts over the years have taken actions to conserve the environment in many ways, talk of tree planting across many countries, talk of cleanups. We have examples of Scouts doing coral restoration initiatives. We have mangrove restoration along the coastal areas. And these are just some of the ways that young people in the movement are playing a part in addressing climate. We have Scout centers across the continent, and these are spaces where young people come to learn, to camp, but in the process, they also learn about nature, and we call them Scout Centers for Excellence in Nature and Environment. And they are spaces for also community members to come and engage and learn about conservation. So we use them as to create awareness, not just to the Scouts and the other people using the centers, but also the communities around. Food security is also a big issue. And as a movement, we have a program around currently running in about 16 countries where we are working with young people to teach them basic agricultural skills that in a way that they are able to not just supplement small family meals, but also support their schools as well, considering that in many parts of the country, of the continent, scouting happens in schools. I've talked about renewable energy. We are also big on creating awareness and advocacy around the need for young people to play a part in discussions and actions around sustainability, but also for community to be more conscious of the need to adopt more sustainable lifestyle. But I will also mention the work with WWF country offices. We have specific countries that have very strong linkages with WWF, and Scouts and WWF collaborate on a number of initiatives across, for example, Madagascar. These are just some of the examples of the work that we are doing. And as a movement, we have a strong commitment towards the environment, and always welcome collaborations like this one with WWF to support us, enable young people to not just be more conscious, but also to take action in whatever way that they can to address local challenges. And just imagine with a global movement of over 57 million, what we can achieve together. So we are calling on your continued collaboration, but also with any other institutions to reach out, and let's strengthen these efforts. We have a big opportunity with young people, and we can work together to ensure that they play a part in creating a more sustainable planet for us all and for the future. So thank you very much. Back to you, Rejan.
Thank you for the great presentation, Nelson, which is this is Senior Manager, Communication and Partnership from the World Organization of the Scout Movement in the Africa region, is our external and youth voice representative. Thank you to all of our panelists. I want to open the floor now to the audience online. We have about more than 50 people on this 1 hour. This makes a total of more than 1,000 hours for Africa, for the biggest hour for Earth. So to kick off, I have a question to Dr. Amani. We are in a challenging time across the world. The devastation in Mozambique, the famine in East Africa, and the rising cost of living worldwide is putting a lot of pressure on people. What then is WWF doing to raise awareness and address the reality in our lives right now?
Yeah, thank you again, and thanks everybody for giving this question. Is a big question in terms of what WWF is doing, and as you can already see, we all need to come together and do something about nature. There's no doubt about that. The world is talking and talking and talking, and there's actions being done, but they obviously need to be scaled up. So one of the things that WWF we have been doing, first things first, vulnerability assessments are conducted to identify landscape-specific challenges that we have in some parts of the world, certainly in some parts of Africa. And then often we support and help the countries develop, climate change, strategies for addressing the challenges for key sectors. So what is it that we're going to do on agriculture, for example? What is it that we can do around forests? What is it, in Africa, as you can, as you understand, we normally, talk about adaptation and because mitigation, the countries and communities that have really messed these things up, we know it's coming from the industrialized countries, in a bigger way. And we are struggling in Africa and talking about adaptation on agriculture, adaptation on forest. Infrastructure is being hit. Can we adopt, fisheries, livestock? So, and then implementation. Some of the actions, first things first again, meteorological predictions. There's a warning right now in Tanzania here, big downpour of rain is going to come, today. It was predicted yesterday, it didn't come, probably today. So the how good are these predictions? I think I say the seasons are messed up, but at least we have to predict something in order to survive. Disaster management preparedness. Preparedness is coming, it's gonna get worse. How do we prepare? We do land use planning so people can do better planning and survive. Sustainable land management, can you produce more using less and conserve what you have because you're going to need it. Climate, we have been doing to most of we do a lot of forest landscape restoration, and we have a program on forest landscape restoration for Africa, and working with all African countries, all these, mountaintops and landscape that we have, removed for various purposes. We need to put it back. It is the best that Africa can do to cope with this. We got to restore and we got to protect, everything from water sources and wetlands, mangroves. You are going to be hit from everywhere, from the ocean side. Mangroves gives you the protection, but often we chop them down also. So there is a clean energy solutions. We talked about the wind. My colleague Thomas talked about solar, geothermal. There's so much solution. There's so much we can do in Africa, and we're doing all these, in our own small and big way. We need to scale up. One thing that I would like to highlight is that, after all these confused the systems and climatology, is popping up in human-wildlife conflict. The animals are struggling, we are struggling with water, and this is a big thing. It could have a climate change signature. It could be a signature of other things, poor planning and choking their corridors and stuff like that. So these are the kind of things that WWF have been investing heavily and we continue to invest and at the same time conducting advocacy for reducing the greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. We got to clean it up. Some people, you have to give away something, as countries, economies, individuals, businessmen. We got to give up something to save this planet, or we're going under with it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Amani, for the highlights that you gave. As you mentioned, Thomas, I have another question for him. Thomas, this is amazing to see many countries on the continent have the potential to tap into wind, solar, and geothermal energy. The financing of this grid extension might only reach our urban areas and more likely the major companies that can afford this. The example of Tanzania putting up solar panels in school and health centers is one great example. What policy or work is being done by any country to bring lighting to rural and remote areas?
Thank you very much, Rejan. As you saw, I explained that we are working with financial institutions. We have trained financial institutions so that they are able to offer affordable and cheap financial loans. And more important, we have trained them so that they can see the importance of giving loans for renewable energy instead of giving a loan for a car, for example. So they should see that as a product and a big opportunity in Africa. We believe that engagement of the private sector and particularly affordability of the loans is very, very important. So basically what we are doing is linking cheap capital from the West so that that can be accessed by the local financial institutions who should then go ahead to be able to roll this to the ordinary people at sustainable and affordable loans. So it's still an ongoing process. But we believe that would be able to catalyze renewable energy in Africa. And we compare it to the activity which the mobile phone did to the landline 10 or 20 years ago, where you really needed to be somebody to get a landline. And then all of a sudden, now everybody has a mobile phone and everybody can access mobile money of M-Pesa or anywhere in this remotest village anywhere. So we believe that kind of transition should also happen in renewable energy. Why do we believe that, or why do we do that? We do that because all African countries have been on average independent for 50 years, apart from the newbies like South Sudan and all those ones. And you cannot convince us that for 50 years of independence of any particular African country, you still have energy access to the levels of 30%. Some even have 15%. So what is not happening in the grid sector? Something is seriously wrong. And most African governments still believe that once you provide energy at the grid, you will have solved the problem by having a big hydro or a big gas plant, which is good, which is correct, but also wrong, because you need to maintain the poles, you need to maintain the transmission, you need to make sure that the transmission is, the losses are few. And then people will also not afford the average $200 to $300 or $400 to be able to connect to the national grid. So it makes more sense to support these people to get, for example, $1,000 or $1,500, then they have a solar of their own. And then they can repay that loan and do not have any monthly charges. Thank you. I hope I did answer the question. Back to you, Rejan.
Thank you, Thomas. For just the last question, and then I will give the floor for the people connected, is for Nelson. Given the next 7 years are crucial to build better the Africa we want under the current climate crisis, and where adaptation has its own limits, it is clear Africa needs to accelerate the implementation of effective adaptation solutions. What transformative adaptation actions we need to leverage for Africa, and how Earth Hour could support driving that? Please, Arisol.
Thanks so much, Regine. I think that I already raised some of them during my talk, but something that I would like to stress on, and I think my colleague Thomas as well talked upon that, is for sure that we need to deliver our national priorities, but we need to think, in addition to that, we need to think of like transboundary action. As African, like a landlocked country, starting with that, we are sharing resources. So we need now to really to see how we can implement large-scale projects that will involve country interest. And where I can take as an example, currently we are facing human wildlife conflict in Africa, and water issues as well. How we can set up like a transformative approach within protected areas, not only focusing on managing only one protected area in one country, but considering the landscape level. So we need really to make sure that we are delivering through these multi-country, multi-country approaches to make sure that we are dealing together with the issue of adaptation and the issue of climate change. And regarding the funding issue, we have a lot of movement happening in Africa, and how we can really use this movement. We can talk about youth movement, civil society organization, and others. How we can use this movement really to make sure that we get the money that we Africa needs to support the implementation on the ground. And we need to, as said, we need to be the strong player on that, as we have really, I would say, less window to really make sure that we can be resilient in the coming years. And regarding this Earth Hour, as it's like 1 hour to reflect about positive things, I would say that let's also use this 1 hour to really share, I would say, an innovative solution that could be scaled up in Africa, and use the movement as well to do so. So maybe I will stop there, Regine, and over to you.
Thank you so much, Ariso, for your highlights. I will now hand over to my colleague, Christian Passy, who is handling the Q&A and the chat. So I give the floor to Christian to ask the question from online people.
Okay, thank you very much, Rejan. We have a few questions here that we will direct to some of our panelists. I think more questions will come later. Yeah, you have my video on, sorry. So let's start with the first question that I have with me here. The question is directed to Nelson Opani. I will read it. How are the Scouts plastic projects been impactful? Can you tell us if any policy or changes have happened in Africa? After this first question, there are some other questions that are not directly to a particular panelist that I will read. I think Nelson can first answer with this one, and I'll read the other questions.
Thank you, Christian, for the question. I can respond in 3 ways. Number one is that, first of all, is that we are an educational movement, and a lot of our work is focused on empowering young people with the information. And the change for us begins really at a very personal level. And we've seen Scouts and young people adopt a more sort of a they are more sustainability conscious in terms of the use of plastic. Currently, the project is being piloted in about 8 countries. And what we've seen in these countries is, apart from the issue around behavior change, is that we also been working with the UN Environment, whom we've developed this program with, as well as UNICEF, to place young people on platforms where they are able to advocate for issues around climate change, and particularly in this case around plastic waste reduction. The other thing is that we've been present at the COP, and part of the work that we do at the COP is to bring onto the table youth voices on issues like this, including plastic waste reduction. The other thing I would say is that we've seen countries where this program is running adopt or initiate programs, for instance, like for recycling. An example is that in Kenya, when you go to the Royal National Scout Camp, you'll find stations where young people collect plastic waste, and then the association has a partnership with a local company that comes to collect this for recycling. So those are some of the things I can mention we've been able to see happening with regards to the plastic waste reduction initiative. But I think we're still working on enhancing our work, particularly around advocacy, and trying to have the movement do a little bit more in terms of influencing national policies on this issue. Thank you.
Okay, Nelson, we still need you because there's another question that can be just a follow-up to this one. We have received this question from Guinea-Bissau. They say that there's no WWF office in Guinea-Bissau. The person who's asking the question is asking how they can build a partnership with the Scouts, and how WWF and the Scouts can give their contribution.
Thank you. We have an active National Scout organization in Guinea-Bissau, and we, just like we've done with countries where WWF have country offices, we have connected the country offices with the National Scout organizations. Where WWF is not present, you can reach out to us at the regional office, and we can provide you with direct linkage with the Scout Association at that level.
Okay, thank you very much, Nelson. There's another question right now for our Zambian colleagues. I think there are some members of the panel, or maybe other members here, who are from WWF Zambia. And the question is, what is WWF in Zambia do to mitigate the high levels of deforestation happening there? And the other part of the question is that note that the majority of the population is unemployed and cannot afford hydroelectricity for cooking needs. And the so-called alternatives are very expensive. So it's kind of two questions wrapped up in one. So if anyone can answer this question directly to our colleagues in Zambia.
I can.
Sorry.
Daktari, you can talk first, and then I'll complement what you've said.
Yeah, I think, oh yeah, because Thomas, yes. So with the deforestation, I think Zambia is participating, is one of the countries participating in an initiative, what is called Afri 100. You know, Afri 100 is the Bond Challenge that is coordinated from African Union, and is bringing together, you know, African countries and taking stock of deforestation that has happened and what needs to be done in doing aggressive, large-scale, you know, forest landscape restoration. So that program in the participating countries have gone through a process of identifying, you know, the land and the where and how much, you know, restoration can be done in those countries, and in putting together strategies for fundraising. And so it's a regional program. You know, it's not just for Zambia itself. Tanzania is involved. Uganda is involved. So many countries are involved. So I think for once, you know, the sub-Saharan African countries are coming together, and you realizing that something in a very big way need to be done to do, to address deforestation. And, this deforestation happened because of industrial scale activities. We believe that it will need industrial scale interventions, not just low-grade intervention, industrial scale intervention. What does it mean? I think the countries are talking together and seeing what can be done to take things probably not back as it were, but to remedy the situation. So I just wanted to talk about AFRI-100 and the FLRA program, and Thomas, you can complement that with the other things.
Thank you very much, Dr. Amani. Thomas, if you can just add a little more detail to this answer, please.
Yes, thank you so much, Dr. Ari, and thank you so much, Christian. At the Energy Hub, we are supporting Zambia. We have just started, so nothing much has happened, but we are trying to support Zambia to be able to tap into renewable energy investments. We just organized a big symposium where the government of Zambia presented their own renewable energy ambitions to an audience of Chinese investors for potential investment. So we are following that up. We are not sure if it will happen today or tomorrow, but that is a process ongoing. But to my colleague who asked the question, it's a very good question, but it's also very interesting because work, particularly in Zambia, Namibia, and Southern Africa countries, is very tricky. Why do I say tricky? Particularly with energy access, because you have very big countries with very few people. So for any investor to target a country of 3 or 4 million or 2 million like Namibia, or 10 million like Zambia, which is twice as big as Uganda with 40 million people, then it's not advantaged. And that brings into play the issues of distributing and having centralized and decentralized systems. Because when you talk about a centralized system, you can imagine putting in a lot of grid power and transporting electricity from a hydroelectricity dam, which you are talking about, to a household or a small village of only 5,000 or 10,000 people, and yet you have to transport electricity for so many kilometers. So those is challenging. That is why probably you will find that electricity generally will be a little bit expensive. So what we do that is to try to put in advantages of having mini grids and microgrids, which are decentralized and will only be able to support people at that particular space where power is needed. But as usual, that will need support, that will need finance, that will need proposal development for the potential investors. But we believe that is the way to go for the long term, because Africa is big, really, really big, covers a lot of kilometers, and powering Africa is a big challenge, particularly on the infrastructure side. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Thomas. I think we are running out of time. We are going to the last question before wrapping up this Zoom call. This question is coming from Tanzania, and I think that, of course, it will be answered by Dr. Maningusaro. So I'm going to read the question. Young people from large populations in our communities. Well, the person wants to say that there are young people from large population in our communities, and they are the biggest consumers of digital content. So what is WWF doing to make sure they reach this large population digital? Maybe it's not the expertise of Dr. Amani, but since he's from Tanzania, he will answer that, or any other expert here from WWF. So can you give an answer to this question?
Well, yeah, exactly. There's a person that is more qualified to answer. I think we have done quite a bit of investment, and over the last few years, we have stepped up our communication capabilities, within WWF in terms of, we recognize that whatever you do, you need to scale up, and you need to reach the right people, and we have actually partnered with Vodacom, that is the providing the cell phone, one of the largest cell phone provider, in the country, and we have a strategic partnership with them, and we use that actually to reach millions of people that are on subscription to Vodacom. That's just one. And in the past as well, we have very distant past, we have participated in construction of the communication towers at the time when this was just the early stages, and there were not so many of them, and so for reaching marginalized communities in the island, islands that are remote. We have Instagram, and we have all these other things that the young people are using, and they can reach out the website. So we have developed all those, and also engaged. We used to have a press meeting with the journalists every couple of months. This is something that we have to go back into it. But I think I can comfortably say that we are in a position today that we were not, a couple of years ago in terms of the digital content. There's so much information that can be accessed online using our outlets and the ones that we have. So we can, if you're in Tanzania, you can reach out to us and we can engage. In this Earth Hour, for example, there's so much investment that we have made in billboards. And yesterday I was just going home and I was shocked, to see all these, displays that we have, in key parts of Dar es Salaam, for example. And this is something that we're going to continue to work with young people and produce products that actually, reach that kind of section of the population in Tanzania. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Mani, for this answer. I think there are still some questions coming in where they should have come, well before, because we are running out of time, but we are going to read them. The next question is, again, a general one. It's coming from Namibia, from Ndadi Idipo. His question is, I'm Daddy from Namibia, and I'm happy with the programs that Namibia is doing or are being carrying out, especially on human and wildlife conflict management. But my question is, where do we direct our renewable proposals for funding as young people? So,
Thomas,
this one.
Renewable proposals. I think we have a WWF office in Namibia, and renewable energy proposals. I think since we have a representation there, the first line of defense is going to WWF Namibia. WWF Namibia is wired up with other WWF offices in Africa and other WWF offices globally. As a network, we have the regional coordinator, who is Thomas Opande. At some point that will land on his table, and he can give you the visibility as well in terms of how to navigate getting your thoughts and giving you advice on how to, where to go for funding and other opportunities. So maybe Thomas, you can shed on that as well.
Sorry, I was a little bit off the top for about the last minute. Christian, sorry for taking your time.
No problem at all. I think that Dr. Mani has given the right answer to this person concerning, all these problems that is mentioned about human wildlife conflict in Namibia and how to address the office there. There's another question from Cameroon in the same subject of human and wildlife conflict. It's coming from Christelle. Thank you very much for this how dedicated to nature. I'm just asking how in Cameroon, this question of conflict between between people and wildlife is managed and how it can be mitigated?
So I will take that question. For that reason, for sure that something that we raised during this call is regarding human-wildlife conflict, and even without climate change, these are something that has already happening in the past. But with climate change now, it's quite becoming a big issue in Africa. And for that reason, with WWF, we are really trying to understand better what is really the main causes of this human-wildlife conflict and causing the vulnerability of people as well as of the wildlife, and where, because the main issue right now, if I'm taking, for example, water issues, this is one aspect of creating human-wildlife conflict in Africa, and the drought issue as well linked to that, the food insecurity as well. So what we need to put on the table is really to understand first what are the issue driven by climate change on that and other issues, and putting in place some right strategy. And as I said in my talk, is we need to think about more transboundary management, where we can, for example, with elephants, there are really issue of water, given that elephants need a huge water. So we need really to see how we can manage that within a transboundary areas. When I say transboundary, is cross-country approach that will help us to manage the migration of this wildlife, and where we need also to invest more, how we can support the livelihoods of these people, not relying on, I would say, traditional livelihoods, but where we can diversify with climate change happening. Over to you, Christian. And I don't know.
Thank you very much, Risol, for this answer concerning human-wildlife conflict.
I can add a little bit, Christian, on this. And yeah, we're still grappling with what has happened. The last couple of years. It has been much worse. Pretty much everywhere. And there's a little signature of a few things, and the climate change is definitely one of them. The resources are not the way they were in terms of rangelands and water and pasture for these animals and people. The populations have grown, and there's issues of encroachment. These animals have always been there. We have no enough data to say that the populations of elephants and other, in fact, they have gone down. In many parts of Africa, they have not increased. But what has happened is that because of population growth of people and the uncontrolled mushrooming of settlements, and often in the on the corridors that these animals used to be traversing as they move from one sanctuary to the other, from one park to the other. So that has been the trigger, that they don't have, those pathways have been blocked, and the land use planning is a big thing that we have messed up in the past. And there's places we can go and the places we can't go. And if we just go uncontrollably, then the clashes happen between human and wildlife. So there's a bit of many factors into it, and the uncontrolled development, but also fighting for resources in terms of animals and people alike. So it's a big problem that we need to come together and try to solve in Africa.
Okay, I think we have maybe 1 or 2 minutes for the last question, because we are now quite beyond our allocated time. This question is from Mr. Hope or Mrs. Hope Okute. Is for, I think, for Thomas. What's saying is Africa is endowed with renewable resources, but only 2% of total renewable energy finance has been channeled to the region. What do you have to say about this?
Thank you for the question. That's a very, very good question. We are still able to attract very low renewable energy finance, partly because we don't have friendly policies, because you know that finance comes with a very strong private sector. So if we don't have a strong private sector, which enables strong policy and regulatory frameworks, which allow the private sector to be able to thrive, and for private sector to thrive, we must also have a very good demand from the local people to be able to use the product. And that brings into play the issue of affordability. So it's so many complex issues. And basically, that is why Africa has not been able to thrive in those fronts. We don't have a very strong financial sector to be able to tap into that. We still have very high interest rates, and we don't have a very good regulatory framework for private sector engagement. I think in my presentation, I did prepare something which I showed you the countries in green dots and red dots. And you see that in Africa, we still have so many countries still on green dots. On the positive side, the countries like Kenya, which have been very progressive in terms of policy framework, just like Dr. Amani had said, you find that Kenya becomes the second country after Iceland in generating geothermal power, which is very, very positive. And almost 60 to 70 or 80% of the Kenyan energy is renewable. So if other countries can emulate such kind of initiatives, I think it would make more sense, and we would be able to attract that, because technically on the ground, there should not be any challenge, because we rely a lot on solar, and we have the solar, we have the wind, we have all the renewable energy raw materials. But as Africans, we always believe that we have to export something to be able to generate revenue to invest. But unfortunately, according to God, you cannot export renewable energy. That is the only product we cannot export out of Africa. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you very much, Thomas, for this answer. So I think I will hand over to Rejan, who will take us to the final part of this Zoom call. Thank you very much for all the questions and for the answers. Maybe there are some more questions that will come later. We will find a way for you who have not had the opportunity to ask your question now, to direct them in one way or another to our panelists, and to get in touch with them, to get in touch with the WWF offices and get more answers to your questions. Rejan, I'm handing over to you.
Thank you so much, Christian. I want to thank you to all our panelists and all the participants online. I think we are past the hour of this time, because that was so interesting. I want to thank also the organizer of this webinar. And again, I want to thank you all for your support. And please feel free to visit our Earth Hour website. So I will just end the webinar now, and thank you all again for your participation.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much, and all the best to everybody. Yeah.
Bye.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Very much. So, is it only us now? Tout le monde est parti? On n'a pas prévu un petit temps ou juste 2 minutes où ensemble bon, ce sera peut-être après, hein?
There is still people online, I think.
Ok. Bon, moi, je vais devoir quitter aussi parce que j'ai quelque chose qui m'attend à faire. Et voilà, c'était bien, hein, tout s'est bien passé.
Could an hour change the world? Impossible. It's just an hour. But what if it meant that anybody, anywhere, could find 60 minutes? 1 hour to do good for our shared tomorrow and our shared home. An hour that compels millions to act and makes millions more take notice. An hour that could unite cities, countries, continents, showing what we all have in common and what we stand to lose. Reminding us that the challenges may be plenty, but we are powerful. An hour inspiring us to make all other hours count. Could an hour change the world? It's a start, and it's up to us. Switch off your lights and give an hour for our planet on the 25th of March. Together, let's create the biggest hour for Earth.